There are many reasons why the fall of the Roman Empire is one of the greatest tragedies in human history. From the wonderful and lost beautiful architecture of antiquity, with its splendid temples, impressive statues, dome, great baths, and impressive imperial forums, the lost works of many great philosophers of ancient Greece whose works were kept in many great libraries throughout the empire, to the loss of astonishingly advanced technologies of science and engineering. In this video, we will explore the most advanced Roman technologies, which were in use at the time of the Roman Empire that were lost when the Roman Empire fell and needed to be rediscovered many centuries later. Advanced engineering, first. Roman concrete. The Romans sometimes are. But we will see during the course of this video that this is not true, as most of the inventions in this video here are purely Roman. And Roman concrete is such a purely Roman invention that it was so far ahead of its time that in some ways it is still superior to the concrete we use in our modern times. On the one hand, Roman concrete is much more durable and long-lasting, especially against exposure to water, and has a much lower environmental impact than modern concrete. As early as the 2nd century BC, the Romans had perfected their concrete mix. They were already able to build underwater structures using the pouring of submerged concrete, structures that sometimes survive to this day, as for example in the ancient city of Caesarea. The dome of the Pantheon is another example where Roman concrete was used, allowing to create a dome unprecedented in size. The Romans achieved the extreme durability of their concrete by adding volcanic ash called pozzolan, the ancient mixture. Some modern concreting companies are trying to emulate Roman concrete by replacing volcanic ash with coal ash, which offers similar properties. It reduces costs by up to 60%, has a lower environmental impact with lower carbon emissions, and offers a much longer service life than our modern concrete. It's fascinating to see that the Romans were so far ahead of their time with their concrete that we're actually copying the ones to this day. Another impressive feat of Roman engineering is the giant aqueduct systems they built that supplied the great cities of the empire with fresh water. Water Claudia, for example, completed under Claudius' empire in 52 BC, provided the Rome 192,000 cubic meters of fresh water per day brought to the city from a distance of 69 miles. At its highest point, this impressive aqueduct reached an incredible 33 meters above the ground near the Palatine Hill. But aqueduct constructions in other parts of the empire were even more incredible. The aqueduct that supplied the city of Decapolis with water had a section of 106 km. Excavated through a mountain, this is the longest known tunnel of antiquity. To make it even more impressive, the tunnel has a slope of only 1 meter by 3.2 kilometers. Even today, this would be a challenging feat, and modern measuring equipment would be needed to build a tunnel with an extremely low slope. Or the 50-mile-long aqueduct that supplied modern Nîmes with water. The average slope of this aqueduct was also extremely low, with only 1 in 4,800 meters led to an impressive aqueduct, the famous Cattle Point. Thus, we see that the Romans were masters, builders, and built at a level that would still challenge some modern engineers today. Gigantic buildings. The Romans were also pioneers in the construction of truly massive buildings or building complexes. The Caracalla Baths, for example, completed in 217 after Christ, covered an area of 100,000 square meters or 10 Acres were in parts 40 feet high and boasted a dome about 36 feet in diameter. Then we have the Basilica of Maxentius, the last great building built in the Roman Forum and completed in 312 after Christ. The side walls of this building still survive to this day and are suspended 39 feet above ground level. Or the largest Roman temple ever built, the Temple of Jupiter at Heliopolis, also known as Baalbek. Some of the temple's giant columns are still standing. They are 20 feet tall and 2,5 feet tall. They are the largest columns ever built in antiquity, and we have no idea how the Romans managed to erect these giant columns. It is speculated that they must have built a very capable crane just for this purpose in order to be able to erect these massive columns that weigh tens of tons each. The heaviest blocks of the surviving part of the temple weighed up to 100 metric tons and needed to be erected 20 meters above the ground, a truly incredible feat of engineering. Interesting note aside, the Temple of Jupiter was built on a platform. This platform contains some truly gigantic cyclopean stones, some of them weighing 800 tons. It is quite unknown how such massive stones were moved in ancient times. To make it even more impressive, in the nearby quarry, stones were found where extraction had already begun, weighing 1,200 tons and one even 1,600 metric tons. However, these stones were left in the quarry. It is with absolute incredulity that we see what incredible feats of mastery of construction the Romans, or the ancients in general, were capable of, since lifting such stones would pose a technological challenge even today. And please like this video and subscribe. And also activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Future on the fascinating era of the late Roman Empire. How did it fall? Because it fell, what would you have seen in that time? The Romans were also the first to understand the carrying capacity of the arches. They made frequent use of them in many aqueducts and bridges, but also in regular buildings. The Alcantara Bridge in modern Spain is an excellent example of the immense load-bearing capacity that Roman structures were capable of. These arches have a width of almost 29 meters and a height of 45 meters, built so solid to give this marvel of ancient bridge construction a carrying capacity. 52 metric tons means that even some modern military tanks could pass through this bridge without causing it to collapse. Fifth, giant domes, but the Romans were also masters at building domes. We have already mentioned the dome of 36 meters in diameter of the huge baths of Caracalla, but of course, the most famous structure of this kind is part of the Pantheon. The Pantheon, this magnificent temple, first built by Marco Agrippa, but rebuilt by Hadrian and finished around 126 after Christ, has an extremely large dome, measuring approximately 142.2 meters in diameter. To put this in perspective as to the ahead of its time, this was going to take 1,300 years before a slightly larger dome of 45 meters in diameter was built with the Cathedral of Florence at 1,436. But to this day, the dome of the Pantheon is the largest dome built with unreinforced concrete in the world. Amphitheaters, the most famous Roman amphitheater, of course, the Flavian Amphitheater, commonly known as the Colosseum. Construction began by order of Emperor Vespasian and was completed on his son Titus in 80 after Christ. The structure is an oval 189 feet long, 150 e, 6 feet wide and 48 feet high, and surrounded by a wall 5 feet high. The outer wall alone is estimated to have contained 100,000 cubic feet of travertine stone kept, joined by 300 metric tons of iron clamps could accommodate about 50 to 80,000 spectators. The exact number is probably somewhere in between them and had a disposition of seats so organized that it could be completely evaluated in just 10 minutes. To achieve this, it had 80 entrances at ground level, where each entrance was numbered, as well as each ladder. This impressive building was so far ahead of its time that it served as a model for modern stadium constructions in the early 20th century. Yet another case where we were inspired by ancient Roman technology in our modern times. Seventh, major road network. The Romans are, of course, also famous for their infrastructure that they had advanced to a degree unparalleled in the ancient world. The 113 provinces of the late empire were interconnected by 372 main roads that amounted to a total of 400,000 kilometers. There were many posts along the roads, many post stations, and even lodging for travelers. When the Roman Empire fell, so did this advanced network of infrastructure, and it would be a long time, 1,000 years, before Europe's infrastructure would again reach levels of advancement as high as in Roman times. To Roman miners, we know that the Romans were also excellent steel workers. It is so. Of course, they had to mine large amounts of iron ore, but especially for their gold and silver coins, large quantities of precious metals had to be mined, and the mining Romans go on such a vast scale that we could actually call this an operation of industrial-grade mining, in some parts unparalleled again in its scale until the modern era. We believe that only we, in our modern times, can have a significant impact on large landscapes with huge mining operations. But the Romans prove us otherwise. In the Spanish region of Leon, there is an unusual scenario called Las Medulla. What's so special about this landscape is that it's man-made. The Romans had mined gold here, on such a large scale that they made entire mountains disappear, and what remains now has so this strange shape. For about 250 years they washed away large amounts of earth from these mountains using hydraulic power. It is estimated that 40 million cubic meters of land were removed from the central zone of the mountain range alone. What we can see in this image is only a small part of what the original mountains were. A mountain containing 200 billion cubic meters of material has completely disappeared. This resulted in at least 1 million kilograms of gold that was mined here during its 250 years of activity. It is remarkable that ancient civilization already had such an impact on the scenes, something that was thought to be a uniquely modern phenomenon. The Romans show us once again how far ahead they were of their time. We think of computers as an invention of the modern era. However, in 1901 divers discovered a strange device in a shipwreck off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera. Although this device is of Greek origin and does not belong strictly to this list, dates from the 1st to the 2nd century BC, and therefore is quite probably from the time when Greece had already been annexed by the Romans, incorporated into the growing Roman Empire. This machine, fitted into a housing of 34 x 18 x 9 centimeters, is a complex arrangement of many gears and sprockets with a precision as was thought to be possible only in modern watches. It was believed that with this it would be possible to predict the position of the sun and the moon, the phases of the moon, eclipses, calendar cycles, and maybe even the location of the planets. Analog computers of such complexity were only built again as late as the 19th century. But if you thought analog computers in antiquity are bizarre, the cup of Lycurgus will prove that the Romans were capable of things that modern researchers thought impossible. The cup of Lycurgus is an example of this. It dates from the late Roman Empire to the end of the 4th century AD, a time when we would think that feats of advanced technology were no longer possible due to the decline of the empire. The cup is special because it is made of a type of glass that appears green in reflected light, but red in transmitted light. So when the light is passing through her. To achieve this, the Romans extracted extremely small gold and silver nanoparticles, only about 70 nanometers in size, and mixed these nanoparticles with glass. It is completely unknown how exactly did they extract particles so small that they can only be seen with an electron microscope from gold and silver. It is very unlikely that they had real knowledge of nanotechnology, but they understood that they were extracting something very small. And what would be the effect of that? The Romans also built a fairly modern irrigation system in their cities. The most famous of all is, of course, the maximum cloaca of Rome, but they also built vast networks of water pipes, providing fresh water from the aqueducts to bathing homes and fountains. The pipes were made of lead, with debates still ongoing about the effect this lead might have had on the welfare of the Romans. This should be explored in a different video, but to anticipate the possible lead poisoning is very low on the list of possible reasons for the collapse of the empire. The Romans also employed floor heating, the so-called hypocaust, where hot air was circulated below the floor. This was used in the villas of wealthy individuals for floor heating, but it was also used in the Roman baths to heat the hot water pools, the so-called caldarium. We can see again how modern the Romans were in many aspects of everyday life. The Romans also pioneered surgery, based on earlier work by the legendary Hippocrates, but they will advance it to a level previously unknown in the ancient world. They used a variety of surgical procedures using many different types of instruments, such as tweezers, scalpels, and catheters. There were even forms of plastic surgery where deformations could be reversed or different parts of the body could be reshaped to achieve a standard of beauty really not unlike what exists today. There were even procedures to remove cataracts, stitch up complicated battle wounds, and more. Aulus Cornelius Celsus was a true pioneer of Roman medicine. And he, for example, described many different kinds of diseases, wounds, and ailments and how to treat them in often surprisingly modern ways. Some Roman physicians even specialized in anesthesiology. The anesthesiologist would administer a powdered mandrake in a drink or wine. Corn poppy sedative powders were often added to wine. A local anesthetic used in the surgery, it was a mixture of mephitic stone and hemlock seeds ground and scattered in the areas that would undergo surgery. Quite impressive and certainly much more advanced than later medieval medicine. Now we are coming to the session where we hope to understand that Rome was not so far from some kind of industrial revolution, as for sometimes we believe. The Romans built a complex of watermills in Barbat Gal, located near the modern Arles, which was called Arlate in Roman times. To supply the 30,000 to 40,000 inhabitants with flour for the preparation of bread, they built a truly impressive complex of mills, employing a total of 16 water wheels. The strength of the water has here been converted on a truly industrial scale, yielding an incredible 4.5 metric tons of flour every day. Thus we can see that the Romans made use of the power of nature and did not rely on slaves to do all the work. It is thus inconceivable that an industrial revolution could have happened. A notion we'll explore in a separate video. But the Romans also built huge water wheels called norias. Although none have survived since Roman times, they are depicted in several mosaics. Here, in a mosaic from the age of Constantine, therefore, from the beginning of the 4th century later, others surprisingly late, from 469 after Christ. And even one of the late Eastern Romans of the era of Emperor Justinian of the middle of the 6th century after Christ. It is believed that the medieval norias of Rama are a direct evolution of the Roman-era water wheels of that region. Roman water wheel technology was also adopted in the medieval era by the Cistercian monks who built on this technology. They refined, and that contributed in some way to helping spark the Industrial Revolution. Therefore, we can say that although the Romans did not industrialize, their industrial application of water wheel technology contributed in some way to igniting an industrialization long after their empire had fallen. If you thought that industrial complexes of giant watermills, I'm already a bit steampunk, then this here will surely be to your liking. The Greek mathematician and engineer Heron, who lived in the Roman imperial era of Alexandria, the intellectual capital of the empire, was a genius who invented many machines. Astonishing. This, the leak pile, was a precursor to the steam engine. Here, the water in a spherical container was heated by fire, and the resulting steam would come out through two curved holes arranged so as to convert the movement of the steam into a circular motion. Thus, effectively a precursor to a steam engine was created, where the energy of the steam was used to create mechanical motion. However, unfortunately, Aaron didn't see the potential behind this invention and only saw it as a fun toy. We can only speculate what would have happened if he had understood the potential of his leak pile, and in fact, this will serve as a branching point for an alternate history video of his future. But Aaron's genius went even further. He built the first known automata, basically some kind of robot precursor. So can we call Aaron the pioneer of robotics or cybernetics? He also built an elaborate automated door opening mechanism for a temple where it seemed to visitors that the temple doors magically opened as if they were directed by a divine power. And did it even build what can be understood as programmable computers? By means of a complex arrangement of strings. And we who would operate figures in a theater. Thus, the entire theater sequence would be performed on its own. Another striking example of a Roman-era machine is Nero's dining turntable. Emperor Nero built a circular rotating platform on the Palatine Hill, probably after the Great Fire of 64 AD. Here, guests could sit on the platform that was part of a larger dining room complex and enjoy the spectacular view of Rome slowly and rotatingly. The machine was quite complex. A series of interlocking gears translated the horizontal movement of the river into a rotating movement of the platform, and the bronze balls acted as bearings under a multi-story layer of wood. A truly magnificent piece of engineering after Nero's reign became tyrannical in his later years. The rotating dining platform was built by his successors and was only discovered in 2009. 9. Greek fire. The Romans invented several military technologies that went beyond the scope of this video, but one should be mentioned here, which was so advanced that it basically saved the Eastern Romans many times from disaster. This weapon was used by the Romans of the East from the second half of the century 7th based on the invention of Callinicus, a craftsman who had fled his hometown of Heliopolis from the Muslim invaders. The exact recipe for the compound used to fuel the flame is still unknown. However, some educated assumptions about its exact composition. It must have been based on crude or refined oil of some kind comparable to that in Palma and modern. It burned and could not be extinguished with water, making it such a powerful weapon in naval warfare. This terrifying naval weapon would save the city of Constantinople often from foreign invaders, especially from the Umayyad Caliphate. It is very possible that the city had fallen much earlier. If only the Greeks of the Eastern Roman Empire did not have such a weapon. 10th, flexible glass. This is a bit shrouded in mystery, and we can't be 100% sure of its authenticity. The story of flexible glass, called vitroflexile, became famous by Isidore of Seville, who told the stories of Pliny the Elder and Petronius. According to his accounts, supposedly, an inventor once came before the Emperor Tiberius. He presented a bowl to the emperor that the inventor claimed was indestructible. Tiberius tried to break it on the ground, but there was no mark on the bowl. Supposedly, as a reaction, the emperor had the inventor immediately executed, fearing that if the recipe for this material was disclosed, it would devalue gold and silver and cause an economic collapse. Pliny himself asserts that the story is more widely publicized than well authenticated. Therefore, we should be skeptical, but a recent article by a researcher claims that such a technology would have been possible in Roman times. According to him, vitroflexible could have been a mixture of boron trioxide, known as borax, which was available in antiquity with glass. Heating sand to very high temperatures and mixing it with borax. It could have produced glass with flexible properties, comparable to modern borosilicate glass. So if the story of vitroflexia were true, it would be another example where the ancients surprise us with technology far beyond what we would think they were capable of. Thus we can see that the Romans were, in many ways, an extremely advanced civilization, and when the empire fell in the West, Europe was plunged into an age of technological darkness, where many inventions would not return for hundreds, if not for 1,000 years. When the empire also fell in the East in its final act, the empire would shine the Renaissance, when many scholars fled Constantinople to the West and brought much lost knowledge with them. Thus we can see that we owe many of our own inventions to the Greeks and the West Romans, and we can only wonder what would have happened if Rome had not fallen.